The coffee machine in the break room of the Grand Calloway Hotel had been broken for 11 days, and Simone Archer had stopped counting. She'd started bringing her own thermos, the dented blue one with the cracked lid that her daughter Phoebe had painted little stars on 2 Christmases ago, and she kept it under the front desk in the cubby next to the reservation binders, right beside the fern. The fern didn't have a name. Simone had thought about naming it. She spent enough time with it, after all. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, standing at the marble check-in desk of the Grand Calloway, while the fern sat in its terracotta pot on the corner of the counter, occasionally dropping a frond onto the keyboard when the ventilation kicked on. She had not named it because she was afraid of what that would say about her social life. "Table for 2, said the man in the gray jacket, sliding his credit card across the marble before Simone could even say good morning. "This is check-in, sir," she said. "The restaurant is through the lobby, past the fountain, first left." He took his card back without looking at her. She watched him walk in the wrong direction anyway, toward the gift shop, and said nothing. By the time he found his way, his eggs would be cold and he would blame the kitchen. That was the predictable rhythm of a Monday morning at the Grand Calloway. Simone recentered the fern, which had tilted 2 degrees to the left overnight, and began her shift. She had worked the front desk for 4 years. She had memorized the floor plan better than the maintenance crew. She knew which elevator doors stuck, which rooms had a draft in winter, which guests would call before 7 a.m. to complain about the ice machine. She could run the reservation system, troubleshoot the keycard encoder, translate for Spanish-speaking guests with a vocabulary that she'd built entirely from telenovelas and a paperback dictionary she kept in her car. Her manager, a man named Clifford Greer, had given her 1 raise in 4 years, 2%. He'd announced it with the energy of someone presenting her with a gold watch. That morning, a man Simone had never seen before walked through the service entrance, not the front door. The service entrance, which was tucked beside the loading dock and required a keycard that not even all the regular staff carried. He was wearing dark slacks and a button-down rolled to the elbows, and he was carrying a clipboard, the kind with the metal clip, the kind that the facilities team used when they were doing their monthly walkthroughs. He had the look of someone who was trying to appear like he belonged somewhere without trying too hard to appear like he belonged somewhere. Simone noticed this the way she noticed everything, quietly from behind the desk while helping a guest with a lost keycard. He glanced at the lobby. He looked at the ceiling. He wrote something on his clipboard. "Here you go, Mrs. Patterson," Simone said, handing the reprogrammed keycard across the desk. "Room 412, elevators to your left. Let us know if you need anything." She watched the man with the clipboard walk toward the housekeeping corridor. She looked down at her computer. She had 17 check-ins before noon. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Adrian Cole. He was 36 years old. He had founded Cole Hospitality Group at 28, expanded it to 11 properties by 32, and been called one of the most demanding owners in the mid-Atlantic hospitality market by 2 separate trade publications, both of which he'd read in full and filed without comment. He had also, 6 months ago, purchased the Grand Calloway outright from a family trust that had been trying to sell it for a decade. His executive team had presented him with the standard acquisition reports: occupancy rates, revenue per available room, guest satisfaction scores, staff turnover. The numbers were fine. Fine was the word that kept appearing. The Grand Calloway was fine. Adrian Cole had never been interested in fine, so he'd done what he did with every new property. He showed up himself, unannounced, with a clipboard and a cover story. Facilities consultant hired for a walkthrough assessment, and he spent 3 days watching how a hotel actually ran, not how the general manager described it running. He had expected to find the usual things: dusty corners the cleaning crew missed, a bar menu that hadn't been updated since the previous administration, middle management who spent more time on internal politics than on guests. He had not expected the woman at the front desk. Not in the way he meant, which, he reminded himself, was not at all, but in the professional sense. She was the first person he'd seen all morning who appeared to be doing 3 things simultaneously without any of them suffering. He watched her check in a family with 2 exhausted children and a stroller that had somehow gotten a wheel stuck in the elevator threshold. She handled the stroller herself, crouching in her uniform to free the wheel while the parents collected their bags. And then she straightened, smiled, and returned to the desk in one fluid motion like none of it had interrupted her. He wrote something on his clipboard. He wasn't sure what. The incident happened on a Wednesday. It was the kind of Wednesday that started badly before it started. The reservation system had a sync error at 5:47 a.m., and by the time Simone arrived at 6 for her opening shift, she had 17 voicemails and a handwritten note from the overnight desk that said, simply, "Good luck." The sync error had scrambled room assignments for 31 incoming guests. Not doubled them up, scrambled them. One guest's reservation had been assigned to a room that was under renovation. 3 others had been given rooms on a floor that was booked entirely for a private corporate event. 2 families with adjoining rooms had been separated by 4 floors. Clifford Greer arrived at 9. He found Simone at her second cup of thermos coffee, working through what was now 22 reassignments on a legal pad because the system was still intermittent. "What happened?" he asked. She explained the sync error. She explained the scope. She listed, from the legal pad, what she'd already fixed and what still needed manual override. Clifford looked at the legal pad. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're absorbing information they plan to take credit for later. "I'll handle the rest of this," he said. "I have it almost sorted," Simone said, not unkindly. 6 more need to be moved. I've already contacted housekeeping to prioritize those rooms. I'll take it from here." He picked up the legal pad. He took it to his office. At 11 o'clock, the regional director, a woman named Patricia Hollander, who came through once a month and always had the look of someone who had somewhere better to be, stopped at the front desk. "Heard we had a rough morning," she said. "It resolved without any guest impact," Simone said. "Clifford got it sorted, I heard." Simone looked at Patricia Hollander's lanyard. She looked at the fern. The fern was shedding again, which seemed appropriate. "Glad it worked out," Simone said. She would have let it go. She had let it go before. 4 years was a long time to develop a capacity for letting things go. But behind her, just close enough to hear everything, Adrian Cole was doing his best impression of a man reading a bulletin board. And he had very good hearing and a very good memory, and he had watched Simone handle that morning from the corridor outside housekeeping, where he'd spent the last 2 hours watching how the hotel actually ran in a crisis. He had the legal pad, too, in a sense. He'd been writing his own. Phoebe was 10 years old and had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, which Simone thought was a combination that would either serve her very well in life or make her impossible to parent through adolescence. Probably both. Phoebe came to the hotel on Fridays when her after-school program ended early, and she sat in the break room doing homework until Simone's shift ended. The staff had adopted her with the easy affection that develops when someone small and funny appears in a workplace regularly enough. The sous-chef sometimes made her a grilled cheese. The bellman, a tall older man named Henry, had taught her to play chess on a travel board he kept in his locker. "Who's that?" Phoebe asked on the 3rd Friday, appearing at the break room door with a cheese sandwich and pointing unapologetically at Adrian, who was sitting at a table near the window, reviewing something on his phone. "Fee," Simone said, without looking up from the schedule she was reviewing. "We don't point at people. Who is he?" Phoebe repeated, now pointing with her elbow. Adrian looked up from his phone. He looked at the elbow. He looked at Phoebe. He looked briefly at Simone, who had pressed her eyes closed in the manner of a woman recalibrating. "Adrian," he said, "I'm doing a facilities review. Our coffee machine's been broken for 18 days, Phoebe said. "That seems like something facilities should know." "I'm aware," Adrian said. "Are you going to fix it?" "Phoebe," Simone finally looked up. "It's a fair question," Phoebe said. Adrian almost smiled. He pressed the expression back before it became something visible. "I'll look into it," he said. "That's what my mom says when she doesn't want to say no," Phoebe told him. Simone put her forehead on the table. Adrian did smile then, briefly, when Simone wasn't looking up to see it. The review had been scheduled to take 3 days. It was now day 7, and Adrian had begun to think that the Grand Calloway had more layers than a standard acquisition could surface. He had read the operational reports. The reports described a hotel that ran adequately, managed by a general manager who had been in place for 6 years and who had, by all measurable indicators, kept the property stable. What the reports could not show was the gap, the distance between what the hotel was capable of being and what it was actually doing with that capability. That gap, he had concluded, had a human shape. Several, in fact. He'd watched the bar manager understock on Thursday nights for 3 weeks straight, creating preventable shortfalls. He'd watched the concierge team consistently overpromise and underdeliver on restaurant reservations. He'd watched Clifford Greer arrive at 9 every morning, take a long lunch, and spend the afternoon in his office with the door closed. And he had watched Simone Archer, every morning, hold the lobby together with the kind of quiet competence that required no audience and received no acknowledgement. He found himself taking notes about her, the way he took notes about structural issues. things that needed to be addressed before the scaffolding gave out. Except the scaffolding wasn't failing, it was the only thing holding up the ceiling. He told himself he was being analytical. This was true. He also told himself it was only professional. This was mostly true. On the 9th day, Clifford Greer called a staff meeting. Staff meetings at the Grand Calloway were not unusual, but they were also not productive in any documentable way. This one had been called, Simone learned from the overnight desk, because the regional director had asked for an update on the sink error from 2 weeks prior. She sat near the back. She had a pen and the small notepad she carried everywhere, the one with the coffee rings on the cover from 6 months of thermos-adjacent note-taking. Clifford presented the sink error incident as a story about decisive management. He used phrases like quick response and systems thinking and cross-departmental coordination. He did not mention the legal pad. He did not mention Simone. The other staff nodded. They had the practiced posture of people who had attended many such meetings. From his position near the back wall, where he'd appeared unremarked 4 minutes before the meeting started, Adrian watched the room. He watched the overnight desk associate exchange a look with the housekeeping supervisor. He watched the bellman, Henry, study the ceiling with particular intensity. He watched Simone write something in her notepad and then stop very deliberately and put her pen down. He had seen that motion before, that specific, calibrated stillness of someone deciding not to say a thing they have every right to say. He had one more day on his cover story. Then he would be expected to file his facilities report and leave. He changed the plan in the parking lot at 6 that evening, sitting in his car, staring at a legal pad that had stopped being about facilities 3 days ago. It was the fern that started it in the end, not in a dramatic way. More in the way that small things accumulate until they tip something over. Simone had come in on a Thursday to find that someone, Clifford she suspected, preparing for a visit from a hotel photography team, had moved the fern from the corner of the front desk to the windowsill on the far side of the lobby. It was a small fern in a terracotta pot. It was not by any objective measure significant, but it had been on that corner for 2 years. Simone had watered it every morning. She had moved it 2 inches toward the window in the fall when the light changed. She had, on one occasion when the lobby was empty and she was having a very bad Tuesday, told it quietly that she hoped it was doing better than she was. She moved the fern back to the front desk without asking anyone. She positioned it where the ventilation wouldn't disturb it. She put her thermos in its usual spot. She didn't know Adrian Cole had watched her do all of this. She also didn't know that he had watched, 3 days prior, when a guest, a man who'd had a difficult flight and was looking for somewhere to direct it, had leaned across the front desk and told Simone that she was obviously not the right person to be handling his reservation, and that he wanted to speak to someone who actually knew what they were doing. She had handled it with a graciousness that should have required more patience than any person reasonably possessed. She had resolved his reservation, upgraded his room without being asked, and wished him a genuinely pleasant stay. After he'd walked away, she had rested one hand on the edge of the fern's pot. Just briefly, like a reset. Adrian Cole had written 2 words on his clipboard that day, and they had nothing to do with facilities. On Friday morning, he walked through the front entrance, not the service entrance. The front door, in a suit without the clipboard. Simone saw him from across the lobby and felt the specific quiet dread of someone whose brain has already processed information before the rest of them has caught up. She recognized the walk. She recognized the way the bellman straightened. She recognized in the next second that she had never actually believed his facilities consultant story for a single day. He stopped at the front desk. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said, because that was the response her training had given her for moments when her instincts were saying something more complicated. "I owe you a proper introduction." He set a business card on the desk. "Adrian Cole, I own the hotel." She looked at the business card. She looked at him. She looked at the fern, which had, with impeccable timing, dropped a frond directly onto his business card. Neither of them mentioned it. "I'd like to talk to you about your role here," Adrian said, "and about some changes I'll be making, if you have time this morning." The conversation lasted 2 hours. It took place in the small conference room off the mezzanine, the one that the hotel used for corporate meetings, and that Simone had booked approximately 200 times for other people, but had never actually sat in herself. She sat across from Adrian Cole and the legal pad. Her legal pad, or a reproduction of it, she couldn't tell, and he walked her through what he'd observed. It was methodical and accurate and slightly unnerving, the way it is unnerving to hear your own habits described back to you by someone who has been paying attention. He told her about the sink error. He told her what he'd seen from the corridor. He told her about the staff meeting. She waited for the part where he told her she should have spoken up, should have advocated, should have handled things differently, the part where her restraint became her fault. It didn't come. "The hotel has a staffing problem," he said. "It doesn't have a shortage, it has a structure problem. People in the wrong positions, competence that's being managed down instead of up." He paused. "You've been doing the work of someone 3 levels above your title." Simone looked at her hands folded on the table. "I've been doing my job. Your job description doesn't include what you've been doing." He set down the pen. "I'd like to change that." She looked at him carefully, the way she had learned to look at things that seemed too straightforward. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means a new title, a real salary. A team that actually reports to you, with the authority to match the responsibility you've been carrying without either." He held her gaze. "It means I need someone who already knows this hotel the way it actually runs, not the way it's described in the reports." The fern was not in this room. Simone had no reset available to her. She folded her hands a little tighter. "I'd want to know the details," she said. "I'd expect that," he said. Clifford Greer left the hotel quietly, on a Tuesday, with a severance agreement, and the particular look of someone who had finally encountered a consequence they hadn't anticipated. Simone heard about it from Henry, who had heard about it from housekeeping, which was the standard information pathway at the Grand Calloway. She was promoted to Director of Guest Operations. It was not, as these things sometimes are, a title without substance. Adrian restructured the reporting lines, shifted 3 department heads to report directly to her, and increased her budget authority to a number that made her look at the offer letter twice to confirm she'd read the decimal correctly. She bought Phoebe new sneakers. She didn't make a big deal of it. She just bought them. Phoebe noticed the difference, not the sneakers, but the way her mother came home on Thursdays. Simone had always come home competent, which Phoebe understood as a baseline fact about her mother, the way she understood that the sky was blue and the coffee machine at the hotel had been broken. Now she came home something else. It took Phoebe 2 weeks to find the word for it. "You seem lighter," Phoebe said, one Thursday evening, from her position on the kitchen counter where she was supposed to be setting the table and was instead eating crackers and watching Simone cook. "Thank you," Simone said. "It's an observation, not a compliment," Phoebe clarified. "Thank you anyway," Simone said. Adrian Cole did not intend to stay at the Grand Calloway beyond the acquisition period. He had 3 other properties requiring his attention, a development project in Charleston and a board meeting in February that would take up the better part of a week. He was not a man who lingered. He had not in the past been particularly prone to it. He called in to check on the Grand Calloway more often than he called in to check on any other property. He told himself this was because it was the newest acquisition and required more oversight. He had a documented record of dishonesty with himself on this particular point that began somewhere around the 2nd week of his undercover stay and had not meaningfully improved since. He came back to the hotel in January, unannounced again, but this time through the front door. Simone was at the front desk. She was reviewing something on the computer and talking to Henry at the same time, and the fern was back in its corner. And for a moment he just stood inside the entrance and looked at the lobby. Not the lobby as an asset, not as a line item in an acquisition report, but as a place that had become something because of the people in it. He walked to the front desk. "The coffee machine," he said by way of greeting. She looked up. She looked at him with the expression she had developed specifically for moments involving Adrian Cole, which was composed and careful and slightly amused. "Was fixed in November, I know. I authorized it." "Took you long enough," she said. 4 months is not long by most standards." "It was 23 days when it was broken," she said. "But yes, 4 months is fine." Henry, 15 feet away, found something extremely interesting to look at on the bellman's stand. "I was hoping," Adrian said, "that you'd be willing to get dinner to discuss the operational updates." The Q1 targets, Simone repeated. "And other things," he said. She looked at him. She looked at the fern, which sat in its terracotta pot in its corner, shedding nothing for once, perfectly still, offering no opinion whatsoever. "I'll need to check with Phoebe," she said. "Of course, she'll have questions." "I'd expect that," he said. There was a beat of quiet between them, not uncomfortable, the kind that has something sitting in it. "Saturday," she said. 7, and you should know that Phoebe will want to hear about the coffee machine herself. "I can explain the authorization timeline," Adrian said. "She'll find it insufficient," Simone said. "She already has opinions about you." "I know," he said. "She told me." Simone blinked. "When?" "November," he said. "She called the corporate office. Simone pressed her eyes closed briefly in the manner of a woman receiving information she should have anticipated. What did she say? She said the fern was looking healthier and she wanted me to know that she thought that was because her mom had more time to take care of it now. He paused. And she said if I was going to keep calling to check in on the hotel so often, I should probably just visit. The lobby was quiet for a moment. Somewhere near the elevator bank, a door chimed open. Simone looked at the fern. It sat in its pot, in its corner, perfectly ordinary green and a little lopsided from the months it had tilting toward the window. She had watered it this morning. She would water it tomorrow. It did not need a name to be something that mattered. Saturday, she said again. 7 o'clock. Adrian picked up his phone and added it to his calendar right there at the desk, which she thought was either very earnest or slightly ridiculous, and she couldn't decide which, only that it made something in her chest do something she hadn't expected. She turned back to her computer. Henry was whistling something tuneless near the entrance. The fern sat on the corner of the desk, catching the January light through the lobby windows, leaning very slightly, as it always did, in the direction it preferred.